ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. I'm very happy, very proud to announce I have Miss Jenna Donatello. She's the owner of Noble Wine Imports, and what is unique about her company is they focus on importing boutique old world wines, old world meaning Europe, that are hard to find. So would you mind just please just give us a little bit of a background on yourself, if you don't mind?
Got a business finance degree from the University of Texas, and I've lived in Austin for 31 years. Went to law school, got my law degree at SMU, and practiced in litigation for a big firm for several years before I had my first baby. And then I kind of worked part-time from home and raised my two babies, which are now 18 and almost 16. And so, yeah, when it was time to go back to work, just didn't want to go back to full-time law. And I had a passion for wine and Europe, Italy. So I just decided I wanted to be my own boss and started doing the research and kind of figuring out how to do this. So started in 2010, had my first sale on my son's first day of kindergarten.
Wow, congratulations.
And, started with one Italian producer and 6 wines, and I've grown it from there.
In a nutshell, like if I wanted to be an importer, what steps do you take? I mean, you said you did the research. How do you do that?
It actually isn't that difficult to become an importer. There are a lot more details and regulations and difficulties in being a wholesale distributor, which I do both. Okay. But to get your importer's license is through the TTB, the Trade and Tax Bureau with the federal government, and you fill out a form. And for me, it was a 10-minute interview over the phone, and they did a criminal background check, which I passed, and they gave me my license, and it doesn't cost anything and lasts forever. That's pretty much it. The only real requirement yearly is you have to keep a customs bond on file with your international shipper. All there is to it.
And then, so what did you do from there? Obviously you love Europe, so is it safe to assume you probably took some trips over to, European countries, and maybe you went to a winery and you love their wines and you asked them, hey, you need somebody to help you import this into the US? Was it kind of like that?
That happened once. How it really started was before I even knew I needed all the licensure and permits. When I was trying to figure out what kind of business I wanted to start in the wine business, there was a small Italian estate wine producer in Campania, Italy, looking for an importer, kind of at the exact right time that I needed, a light to show me the way. And so I started asking him questions. So what do I do? And, he just said, okay, call TTV, get this, and then call your state alcoholic beverage commission and get your wholesale license. So I just started doing that. I had only been at the time to Italy once, and that was 9 years before, but was already planning to go back to Italy. So it was kind of right place, right time. So just connected with him and got all my licenses, and that was from going to a winery and doing a tour at their wine tasting room in Tuscany. So that was kind of the first one where I kind of knocked on their door and said, hey, I just got my importer's license, and is this wine that I love in the US? And they're like, no, that one's available. We'll let you import it. And we kind of shook hands after about a 3-hour conversation, and that was the first one I found independently. Since then, most of my new wines I find producers just send me, usually it's an email, hey, we have these wines, and I ask for prices, and usually they send me samples, and I'll decide from there. Or I'll go to a big event where they're producers behind tables having you taste wine and kind of narrow it down from there. So most of my wines I've found sitting in my office or going to an event, and then I travel to Europe to visit my producers to keep the relationship and all that.
Yeah, in February, I went to the James Suckling Wines of Italy event in Dallas, and I met a number of people there that needed importers. So you would go to events like that, meet people. Oh, you need an importer? Guess what? I'm an importer. And then you just take it from there.
Yeah, I get emails and calls every day from suppliers, wineries all over the world asking for an importer. They want to be in Texas, or they're not in the United States at all, and they're looking for an importer. So there are a lot more wine producers than there are importers.
So there's a need for more importers.
I think so, at least from the producer's perspective.
You facilitate getting the product from Europe or wherever it's from to the United States, but from there, you need a distributor, right, to get it into the stores?
Correct. Because of post-prohibition laws, all states in the United States have some form of the 3-tier system. Some are even 4 tiers, or importer, distributor, retailer, consumer, which is 4. So I can't sell directly to a consumer. There has to be, a retailer in the middle. And so I have a distributor and importer license, so I can sell to the restaurant and be an importer in both hats at the same time. A lot of importers don't distribute. They just bring in large quantities of wine and put it in a warehouse that they can't even get to physically. It's just a big warehouse that does that. And then they just make relationships with distributors, in their state or outside of their state.
If you're, let's say you're a new importer, you just start reaching out to distributors. Hey, I'm a new importer and are you interested type thing? And
exactly. And we do have other relationships with other distributors in the state. I'm trying to expand outside of Texas, but Texas is so big.
So what makes a great importer over one that isn't great? Is it really just as simple as just forming great relationships with distributors and getting good quality product that distributors would like? Is it really, for the most part, that?
Yeah, generally that's true. It's relationships that you make and just having a nose for good wines.
So in the time you've had your distributor business or your business, you mind telling everybody one of the hardest lessons you've learned and one of your biggest successes?
Oh, there are a lot of hard lessons. It's a very competitive industry. And another hard thing is teaching the American public to try new things, and it's not hard once you get them to try a European wine. Almost always they like it. And that's what I love, is just seeing their face go, oh, wow, never even heard of this. Or, I would never have tried this if you hadn't introduced this to me. Well, you probably have the same experience.
It's funny you say that, because when it comes to wine, there's a lot of ignorance, a lot of misconceptions, and a lot of intimidation. Mm-hmm. Well, from my experience, and I've been running this company for 8 years, once people actually taste something, maybe 80% of the time, if not more, they actually like something they originally thought they wouldn't like. Yep. But they just need a little nudge. No, give it a try. And like what I teach my staff is, if somebody doesn't want to try something, always ask why. I was doing a real Chablis, and if you remember from the 80s, they used to have the box wine called Chablis. And I think a lot of people still remember that, because every time I'm doing a Chablis, like, oh, no, is that box stuff? I'm like, no, this is a real Chablis.
Real Chablis.
And they're trying to, like, I had no idea. I said, well, most people don't. That's why we're here. I always like when I can show somebody something different. Yep. And, I mean, sometimes people are even surprised, and they say, wow, I didn't know Chardonnay could be non-buttery and oaky. I said, yeah, that's just a small percentage of California Chardonnays that are like that. But because those wines, I guess through marketing or whatever, they got to be the most known in the stereotype, so everybody thinks that's what California Chardonnay is like. So
that's exactly my experience, and just teaching them. And I say, I know you love Chardonnay, but try it from France. I promise, they've been doing this for 2,000 years, and California's been doing it for 60. So just do the math. It's very simple experience.
Yeah, I also tell people that, the world of wine is vast, and there's so many different styles. I give the chef example because I was a chef for 27 years. You give 50 chefs the same ingredients, you'll get 50 different dishes. And then you may dislike 300 Chardonnays, but you'll probably like at least 30 or 40. You've had your company. What are some things you've learned that have helped you sell more to the American consumer that you didn't know before?
Well, one thing I think we as wine professionals in the industry as a whole, one huge hurdle we've gotten over just in the last few years is rosé. And everyone thought, anything pink is white Zinfandel, and it's sweet and it's flat and it's boring.
I still get that.
yeah, it's really hard to change people's mind. But over the last few years of just pushing it, it has become one of the most popular wines in at least Austin area where I live. There's rosé everywhere, and retailers are buying it up like crazy, and so are consumers. So it's been fun to watch people actually wake up and, you know, try real rosé that's made in the correct way. Yeah, it's a lot of it right now is buzzwords that I use to describe my company and my suppliers that make the wine. Family-owned, small business, multi-generational, lighter wines. People are very into supporting small business right now, so that's been helping. And another thing that I find helpful is it's not hard to find a wine buyer who enjoys and appreciates European wines. It's that they have to sell it to the consumer. And so I help them say what they need to say to the consumer.
Or you kind of coach them a little bit.
Yeah, coach them. And I definitely train the staff at any of the restaurants that I sell to that will let me. So I can get my suppliers, my family's passion through to them, because it makes it easier for them to sell. If they have a story, you know, I can tell them, you know, this is made by two sisters and their name is such and such, and this is where they got this label, and you know, go through the details, and that really sparks an interest in them and makes it easier for them to sell. So it's all downhill, but yeah, it's all about education.
Yeah, no, but the buzzword things, that's a good point, because that usually people like something they can easily grasp onto. And then a story, I don't know if this is true, but when I lived in New York City, there's you know, they're known for bagels. And the most famous bagel place, I don't know if it still is, but because I left New York City in 2003, it's called H&H Bagels. And the story is there's one store on the east side of New York, one on the west, and they're both brothers, but they're both feuding. So when they got in this feud, the one opened one on the other side of New York, so you've got one angry brother on one side of New York and one angry brother on the other. I don't know if that's true, but I like the story. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, and oftentimes it doesn't matter if it's true. And, you know, as long as they have something to hook onto and it gets your wine out the door and into people's mouths, it works. And that's another challenge when people say, well, do you have anything, or if they're going to taste a wine that it's a grape they've never heard of, say Gewürztraminer or, you know, Gruner Veltliner. Well, is it like Pinot Grigio or Chardonnay or Sauvignon Blanc? Because those are the only three white grapes they know. And there are thousands of European grapes, and they don't all taste like one of those three grapes. So it's been a real challenge to say, no, it doesn't taste like any of those, but just try it. So sometimes I just have to even push them even a little bit more. Well, it's like Chardonnay and Pinot Grigio had a baby and then threw a splash of Riesling in it. How's that?
Well, plus, you know, I found that's a good example, because I found that giving people something they can relate to, because like what I do for people who don't know wine, I categorize them. So like I tell people, well, let me put it this way. Generally speaking, and I emphasize generally, I put white wine, excluding sweet, into two camps. You have the buttery, creamy style, and then you have the more light, crisp, refreshing, have some acidity style, and maybe some fruit. And I'll say, this is where I would put this. And then I tell them, look, if you like Gruner Veltliner or this or that, then it doesn't taste the same, but it does have some similar characteristics. So you said that becoming a distributor is harder. There's more like hurdles to jump over. What without going into too much detail, why is it harder? Is it more licenses required, or
more licenses, more money? The license is, you know, the importer's license doesn't cost you anything other than the yearly bond. The distributor's license is, you know, a couple $1,000s every couple of years, and then you gotta rent a certain type of commercial space, and so it takes a lot longer. And if I had a question about, well, can I do this or can I do that, I call a TABC license in one county, and then I call another one, and I get two different answers. And they don't tell you you're doing it, what you can and can't do, until you do it wrong. And then they say, oh, you can't do that. I was like, well, you didn't tell me that. So it's just the local state red tape bureaucracy that have so many different rules and they're always changing versus, federal, it's one and done.
Yeah. Liquor laws seem to be some of the most, how should I put this politely, the most asinine of any.
Illogical from a lawyer's perspective. And, law school, I just call it logic school. They just teach you how to argue and think logically. The alcohol laws make no sense to me.
Okay, I know there are exceptions, but generally speaking, American winemakers do more things to the wine, preservatives, adding sugar, stuff like that, than European winemakers. Is that correct?
That is my general understanding, and from visiting those California wineries versus visiting many wineries in Europe, that is true. They hardly ever use any new oak in Europe, and the California wineries, some use a new oak barrel for one season and then they get rid of it. That kind of aging and/or fermentation is really hiding the essence of what the grape is and stands for. So Europeans, just in general, they don't over oak. They don't really try to cover up the grape as it stands. And there's so many historical laws in Europe that help them do that, because they've been making a certain wine, for instance, Chianti, in a certain geographical area in Italy for so many hundreds of years that's just the way it's done now by law.
Yeah.
And that's a protection of the wine. That way you know what you're getting. Yeah, in general, Europeans don't use, most of my estate wineries, they're organic, but they're not going to go to the trouble and expense to put that organic seal on the bottle. It's just the way it's done and always has been done. But they don't market it that way. It's just because it's normal in Europe. And, they might add a non-natural yeast, but other than that, there's not a lot of sulfites added, or oak or anything. Everything's in stainless steel or concrete, unless it's a red wine that's supposed to be aged. And then they'll use oak, but not new oak.
In your wine journey, what is one of the biggest lessons you've learned, just specifically about wine, in the past 10 years since you've been an importer?
That there's always a new wine to try and more to learn. I will never know everything about wine, and there's just so much out there to try and learn, which makes me happy and excited that I'm not ever going to get bored.
So, for everybody watching, thank you for watching. Jenna, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.